So, I've been thinking. Lately I've heard a lot of people talking about what their ideal society might look like. I've had conversations about it, both online and off, and I've watched a lot of great videos by talented people, and I've read books and articles and really anything you can imagine. There are a lot of good ideas out there, a lot of pretty terrible ones too, but all of it got me thinking. In the past few years, it kind of feels like we've moved from one crisis to another, with no room to breathe in between. Material conditions are pretty shitty for most people right now. I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that the machine just wasn't built for them. So it's important to imagine a world that's better than our own, because if we lose sight of that, then we've given up on doing anything about it. But what sort of world do we want to create? As my politics have shifted further to the left, the type of society I'd want to live in has become a lot more clear to me. Sure, I've read political theory, but I've also lived a lot, I've worked a lot, and I've seen a lot. And that's made me realize where my priorities really are. Of course, it's not enough just to imagine the world you want to live in. You have to touch grass, right? Be the change and all that. Go out and do something about it. Cool, sign me up, I say. I've sat on the sidelines for too long. But where do I even start? Action starts with ideation, after all. I've been trying to do my part and give back, but it's not always easy. Not everyone can join in a strike or a protest, or provide aid and resources where they're needed. Life just gets in the way sometimes. Shit, just surviving gets in the way sometimes, especially when you don't have anyone else to rely on. You could say life has thrown me a lot of curveballs lately. Precarity is the name of the game, under late capitalism after all, and I've had to put a lot of my plans on hold. Some of them were for this channel. I had it all planned out. I was going to open with a banger of a first video, something insufferable and crammed with dry academic quotes, something about capitalist realism and how recent world events have put major cracks in it. A video essay with a capital VE. I still want to make that video, though I'll probably do it much differently than I originally planned. But now, 2 years after I started planning this channel, I'm just now able to make something I'm actually happy with. Part of it was I was trying to bite off more than I could chew, and part of it was not realizing that it's better to put out something flawed than nothing at all. But my content was always going to be very personal. I can't help but put myself into everything I do. I think that's part of why I've always been so bad at playing by the rules. I've had a lot of jobs over the years. I didn't particularly love any of them. I had fun at some of them, and a shit ton of stress at others. And when I left those jobs, whether by my choice or somebody else's, it's only in hindsight I realized how little I actually cared about them. In the end, none of the work I did really mattered to me, no matter how hard I tried to make it matter. I never really found where I belonged, and often I get the sense that I don't belong anywhere. This world feels like it wasn't made for me. I think a lot of people watching this can relate. You might feel like you can never get a good job because you can't afford college or get the prerequisite experience, or because you're not likely to be hired because of something else out of your control, like being non-white, for example, or transgender, or a felon, or disabled, or neurodiverse. But for me, and maybe for you if you've gotten this far, it goes beyond just not finding a good job. Because for a lot of us, maybe a good job doesn't exist. And obviously this might just be a matter of how you define job, because I think most people would like to be doing something with their time, but they'd rather it be on their own terms. Imagine what you could accomplish, what any of us could accomplish, if we didn't have to trade our limited hours here on Earth for paper, or a number in a computer that lets us buy the things we need to live. It wasn't always so abstract. For most of human history, it was pretty obvious to everyone what needed to be done to keep people happy and healthy. People's needs were tangible and immediate. Hunting, foraging, fishing, farming, cooking, preserving, building, making tools or weapons or baskets or clothes, caring for the sick, or children, or the elderly. These were the daily concerns of early humans. I'm not saying we should all become foragers. Far from it. In fact, I think primitivism as a philosophy is pretty shallow, because the premise just doesn't hold up. There's more evidence than ever before that forager societies aren't so much the default type of human society. It's just that that was the way that worked for most humans across history. And it's often been a conscious choice taken by the people in those societies, even as agrarian settler societies took root around them. Foraging makes sense for relatively small groups of people, maybe a few hundred at most, with lots of land to work with. But that's not how most of us live today. Still, we can learn a lot from forager societies, which often provide more freedom and a better quality of life for people living in them, while simultaneously putting much less strain on their environment. But I've become increasingly convinced that urbanized, technologically advanced, sustainable communities and horizontal, more egalitarian power structures are not mutually exclusive. And I'm really tired of hearing people insist that they are, or at least imply that. I think it's pretty clear that we have the technology and the resources available to feed and house and clothe and take care of everyone in the world if we wanted to. In fact, we have for a long time. We could even do something about that whole climate change issue once there are no more private companies around to worry about their bottom lines at the expense of everything and everyone else. And once there are no more states to protect those companies' interests. Between computation and automation, modern agriculture and aquaculture techniques, advances in healthcare and medicine and science, our understanding of ethics and ecology, and the ubiquitous and free exchange of information that the web could provide if it wasn't controlled by a small group of tech billionaires. It's really not unthinkable that we could build more sustainable, prosperous communities and all but eliminate oppression, poverty, pollution, and waste. It really just comes back to how we've organized our societies, or rather, how we've let them be organized for us. But back to work. Work is something that needs to be done, and that will never change. But it doesn't have to be a drag. Imagine how amazing it would be if you could just do whatever you wanted and not have to worry about rent or the bills. What could you do with that amount of freedom? You could study marine biology. You could climb mountains. You could make a painting of everyone in the world, or work on a cure for HIV. Or invent a new type of pizza roll, one that isn't just red paste wrapped in cardboard. Truly, the possibilities are endless. You could spend more time with your friends and family. You could organize community events, or make art or music. You could write. You could make video games, or even just sit around and play them all day. And that would be perfectly fine. Here's a hot take. People should be allowed to not work and still be alive. Any society that calls itself civilized should not require someone to do some arbitrary thing, work a certain number of hours at some bullshit job or whatever, just for the privilege of being allowed to live. Lots of forager societies find a way to deal with this, but how about those so-called developed societies? Not really passing the vibe check, guys. Like I said before, work is a necessity, and I don't see that ever changing. Someone will still have to clean the toilets and dig the trenches, at least for now. But imagine how much easier, how much lighter and less stressful work would be without the constant threat of starvation and homelessness hanging over you. Maybe some of you can't relate. If so, congratulations on your privilege. But a transformation of work benefits everyone. If we're not constantly wasting our time making a few douchebags richer, if we're focusing our efforts on simply making what we all need to live and having a good time, if we realign our priorities to organize economies and governments along human lines, not machine ones, then we'd all be working a lot less and having more fun doing it. I really believe the vast majority of people will be able to see it that way, Even if they don't now, once they no longer have to worry about survival all on their own. Humans are altruistic, reciprocal beings, and we want to give back when and where we can. Sure, some people are always going to be greedy, competitive, antisocial assholes, but it should be up to the community to collectively deal with them however they see fit. But more important than almost anything I've said so far is that some people simply can't work. And a lot more don't work the same as everyone else. Some people are disabled. Some people are pregnant or raising a child. Some people are too old or too young or deal with a debilitating illness. Some people just have a brain that isn't conducive to traditional work. But just about everyone could be useful in some way. Should they be left to starve or freeze to death? And should the burden of providing for them be placed on their friends and families, already overworked and underpaid by capitalists? On some level, we seem unable to free our minds of all of these abstractions we've created over time. Abstractions which outlived their usefulness a long time ago, if they were even useful in the first place. Why should someone's ability to work determine their inherent value? It's unjust, it's immoral, and unnecessarily cruel. There are so many ways that people can contribute to society besides just what can be measured in GDP or fucking labor vouchers. To me, this is one of the core tenets of being an anarchist. Provide for our own, no matter who they are. Just imagine what people could do if their minds and bodies were free to pursue whatever they want. To paraphrase that famous quote from Stephen Jay Gould, how many potential Einsteins have died in cotton fields and sweatshops and on battlefields? How many human beings never had the opportunity to reach their full potential? Intellectually, creatively, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, because they were born in the wrong family, neighborhood, or country. How much better could the world be today if we had empowered everyone to reach that potential, not limited by arbitrary and exploitative systems of economic production? This shit keeps me up at night. This is also pretty personal for me because over the years, I've learned that I just don't like wage labor. I never have and I never will. I've worked full-time since I was 16, mostly service jobs and manual labor. I never finished college because any kind of meaningful degree was out of my reach. And even if I was okay with taking on crippling debt, there's no guarantee a degree would even mean anything. I might never get a job in the field that I chose. I've always enjoyed programming and computer science, but where was I going to find the time and energy to study that on top of my full-time job? I'm working class, and I don't come from money. I've had to support myself for my entire adult life and then some. I've always been on my own. I also deal with other shit that makes bootstrapping my way out of poverty, let's say, difficult. I have chronic anxiety and panic disorder, and I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. My bosses and colleagues have always looked at me and my work as if to say, "Why is this so hard for you? Why do you make all these weird calls and stupid mistakes? Why don't you care?" And it's not that I don't care. I tried to care. It's just that I'm working until my body shuts down, and I'm stressed and anxious to the point of having panic attacks multiple times a day. I just can't do that anymore. Most recently, my last employer abandoned me because of my disability, though they claimed that they were terminating me because my position was no longer available, and they were 86ing my department. I have no legal recourse, and I am still unemployed. On top of all that, I'm also a gay, non-binary trans woman who's pretty early on in her transition. I'm only out now after getting the axe, but I can't imagine things would have gone better if I'd come out sooner. Interviewing for jobs is scary and awkward for anyone, but I don't really pass most of the time. I don't even know if I want to pass. Passing is bullshit anyway, but it's also kind of necessary for a lot of trans people to be able to lead semi-regular lives. With all of this, I can't help but think, what place is there in modern society for someone like me? Where do I fit in the neoliberal mode of production? I hope this doesn't come across as me just complaining, but I think my experience is a good example of how late capitalism just leaves some people behind. Of course, a lot of people have it even worse. I've never been without a place to sleep, for instance. I'm young and relatively healthy. And most importantly, I'm a white, natural-born US citizen, so there are some barriers that I will never have to face, like racism, xenophobia, and imperialism. I don't really know what the future holds for me, especially now that I've been left drifting alone out here. My choices are pretty limited. I've been trying to find a remote gig, but those jobs are in high demand right now, what with the pandemic and the shift toward working from home. It's become sort of a daily grind for me, just scrolling through the thousands of remote jobs and applying for everyone I can, only to find out that hundreds or thousands of other people already applied. So many people are in the same boat as me. It's pretty demoralizing. I'm still looking, but I don't have high hopes. And I can't very well start trapping in space, so it's either OnlyFans or this. I think about what's important to me. What do I enjoy doing? Well, I love writing fiction, but so far I haven't had any luck with publication or production. I love making music too, but until recently, I never had much time to do anything with it. I like video games, and I've always wanted to make them. But I don't know if I could go to work for a game development company. I find it incredibly stressful and taxing trying to function in a traditional work environment for the reasons I listed before. And also, game development companies have a pretty terrible reputation for worker treatment. I'd much rather travel the world, make things, tell stories, talk to people. That's what I love to do. I'm a creative person, and I work best on my own time. Who I am and who I need to be in order to survive and thrive in this world are largely incompatible. And I know I'm not the only one. All of us are just told to deal with it. Something, hard work, something, bootstraps. Is it any wonder we want something different? And even if I were to find my niche under capitalism and thrive in it, could I live with myself knowing that there are billions out there who don't have that opportunity? What about the people stuck in a cycle of poverty? What about those who can't work for whatever reason or don't have a place to stay? What about queer and trans and gender nonconforming people of color who face obstacles and hate in their daily lives that are foreign even to me, a young, healthy, white trans person living in the imperial core? What about all those people living in those nations that my home country and others like it have in a neo-colonial chokehold, slowly siphoning off their wealth and resources? With all the talk about how we can create a world with less cruelty, a happier, healthier, more sustainable, and, most importantly, more democratic one, free of the oppression of wage labor, private property, state coercion, gender and racial hierarchies, and all of that, I don't see enough people talking about how they want to fight for the most vulnerable among us, and how, by extension, the new world we make will accommodate those people. All human beings are inherently valuable and should be treated as such. I think that most people would say that on some level they agree with that statement, with the exceptions of fascists or neoliberals. But in practice, a startling number of people show that this statement of universal human value is really just an empty platitude they're happy to repeat, and then forget as soon as the words leave their mouths. Right-wingers are happy to see the most vulnerable people die, who are seen as broken and a drain on government resources at best, or welfare queens, drug addicts, violent criminals, or degenerates at worst. And liberals love to talk the talk, but as long as they're personally not too oppressed, the status quo is just fine by them. And it has to be said that, among self-proclaimed leftists, the needs of those whom society has deemed broken or undesirable are often forgotten as well. There's a certain flavor of terminally online socialist who I'm particularly worried about. You know the type. They're usually young, white, middle class, and have a formal education. But most of them have very little real-life experience, especially with poverty and precarity, and it shows. They love to quote old dead white dudes and tell other leftists that their way is the only way that will ever work. They love to appropriate the aesthetics of worker communism and defend any state or political party who does the same, no matter how cynically the hammer and sickle were taken up, or how many wars or human rights abuses take place under it. Would these same people stand up for those who can't pull their weight by some arbitrary definition? My gut says no. I should clarify, I'm not coming for Marxist-Leninists here, or anyone who subscribes to a particular left-wing political theory. A comrade's a comrade, no matter the exact political label you use. If you respect personal and community autonomy above all else, and want to fight for oppressed people everywhere, I'll gladly fight side by side with you. But if you're someone who's so blinded by revolutionary fervor and anti-US sentiment that you simp for totalitarian governments, you're no comrade of mine. Sometimes even my fellow anarchists fall victim to ableism. We place so much value on direct action. Some of us fail to remember that not everyone can be on the front lines all the time. And that's okay. There are so many other ways of helping the cause. Ultimately, all of this work-centric thinking is just a byproduct of living in a capitalist society. All of us are defined by our place in the relations of production. Newer forms of capitalism, like neoliberalism, seek to obscure this reality by atomizing all of us. Terms like middle class, and independent contractor, and even entrepreneur come into use. Secondary contradictions like race and ethnicity and gender, and even citizenship status and sexual orientation all come into the mix to further divide us. And those are all important, and they affect people in very real ways. But at the end of the day, if you trade your time and labor for money, you're still a worker. I'm a worker, and I stand in solidarity with workers around the world. There's power in being a worker, because we're the majority, and together we can affect change. But can I level with you about something? I don't want to be a worker. I don't want to be defined by what I have to do to survive. I just want to be a person. I resent the fact that capitalism forced that designation on us. Even though we've reclaimed the term as a point of pride, I don't see it as any less dehumanizing. Worker is a social construct, but like most social construct, it's also an inescapable reality. We didn't choose to be workers. Working is our only option. And that's the whole fucking problem. In a better world, we won't have to call ourselves workers, because concepts like worker and capitalist aren't useful in a society without class or money. There will no longer be any workers. There will just be people. We need a revolution, but it needs to be a cultural one, a human one, not just one of cogs taking over the machine. We have to destroy the machine altogether and build something new. A world that accommodates everyone and makes room for their differences, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or their ability to produce according to arbitrary standards. We can all live full, happy, healthy lives in a world without capitalism. We can build our ideal future together, as comrades, as friends, as families, and as humans. Instead of asking, what type of world should we build? We should be asking ourselves, who should that world be for? Because we can't do a socialism with only the white, abled, cisgender, petty bourgeoisie in mind. We need everyone in this fight. And on that subject, to my fellow socialists who happen to be white, listen to black and indigenous folks, listen to people of color, listen to queer folks and trans folks and non-binary folks, listen to people across the world. Listen to our disabled and neurodiverse comrades. Hear their thoughts and experiences and perspectives, and learn from them. Internalize them. No one has all the answers, least of all you or me. If we want to change the world starting with what we can do in our everyday lives, solidarity must be paramount over dogma. We need to work together to make sure that no one gets left behind. So, where do we go from here? To be honest, I'm not quite sure. I just got here. I'm still figuring all this out. One of my goals with this project is to continue to learn more about anarchism and communism and to deconstruct the hierarchies that capitalist society has brainwashed all of us with, and to learn what practical steps we can all do to help out our comrades in our communities. I also want to open discussions, because I still have a lot to learn. If anything I said made sense to you, please like, subscribe, hit the bell, and all of that. I hope to have more episodes of Fully Automated out soon, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that each one is better than the last. But in the meantime, I'll be here, in my space station, trying to survive and help the cause however I can. Thanks for watching. This is Echo, signing off.
Test out. Thank you, Mel. Configure for your passport. Thank you, Goldstein. Configure for your passport. Thank you, Tulin. Configure for your pass.